I'm Betsy Page Sigman, and I've been here at Georgetown for about 16 years. I'm very interested in the area of mobile payments because of the opportunities that exist for sort of huge change in the way we pay for things. And I think that day's been coming for a long time. I've been doing e-commerce, studying e-commerce since about 1997, 98, when it sort of burst on the scene, right after it sort of burst on the scene in 95, really, with the introduction of the World Wide Web. I've just gradually started to focus more and more on mobile payments. I'm also very interested in the Apple Watch that was just introduced and whether that will be used for mobile payments. It's designed to be used for mobile payments. There have been some difficulties with it, but I see that there are also some real opportunities there. People don't want to have a heavy phone on them when they're, for example, going out for a night. If they could pay for something on their body, if you will. And of course they tried the little injected piece of rice size equipment, computer chip, and that didn't prove to be too successful. So I'm sort of interested to see if this sort of watch idea will actually come to fruition as a mainstream method of payment.
Okay, great. So as we said before, our project is focused mainly on the Square Reader.
Right.
What is your understanding of Square's business model?
My understanding of Square's business model is that it serves as a way for people to have their own simple system of taking in payments, and I've found it very interesting to see where it just sort of turns up in daily life, and music teachers. I have 4 kids, so I've dealt with a lot of music teachers in my life, but music teachers now are using Square. So what does that do for them? Well, it alleviates the whole idea of checks. They no longer have to deal with checks at all, really. They get instant payment. They have some verification that the parents are, paying for it as they pick up their kid. It gives an advantage to parents because they can pay with credit card. They don't have to write a check. It gives, when it works right, it doesn't always work right, and I've also seen that it can be sort of clunky sometimes. People don't know how to swipe the card through. They don't know how to put it in right, so it reads everything. They don't exactly know how to go through the steps to bring it up on their phone sometimes. But overall, it's a pretty efficient way of taking payment, I think, and it really offers opportunities. I see around here on campus, students are using mobile payments a lot. They like to use mobile payments, and they're using Venmo. Now, I haven't investigated, a lot of my students use Venmo, and I haven't investigated if there's some way to link that to Square. It's probably not. Probably you have to use Venmo.
Our understanding, or at least my understanding, is that Venmo is a quasi-competitor of Square.
Yeah, that's been my understanding too. Although it would certainly be beneficial to both if they took each other's payments. But I know students especially want these easy ways to pay, and they also want to put things on mom and dad's credit card or their so-called credit card. So I think there are an awful lot of opportunities there.
Okay. Kind of in light of that new series of demands, we found that Square is not exactly a profitable company. Do you see any sort of relationship between this business model and their lack of profitability?
Actually, business models for electronic payments have been slow in general. The new ones, other than credit cards, everyone gets used to credit, and of course Square uses credit cards. So ideally, it should be more popular than some because you don't have to download the app. You don't have to. It sort of combines the old with the new. I think eventually Square doesn't have a sustainable business model for the long term, because I think that in the long term we're not going to deal with credit cards, we're going to deal with apps. So I wouldn't predict 5 years from now their model would be successful. I think credit cards are going to go the way of the dinosaur pretty soon, not immediately.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Bill Gates says we're a lot better at overestimating what happens in the next 2 years and underestimating what happens in the next 10. Mm-hmm. So I think I could safely say that 10 years from now we're not going to have credit cards. Whether we're having them 2 years from now, I think we'll probably have still a lot because people are comfortable with them. So Square would have that opportunity. But if I were Square, I would be thinking in the long term moving to an app-oriented model where you don't have to swipe any card.
Okay. Square has also been attacked kind of through its history on security grounds. Mm-hmm. It sounds like the app model would be, a way towards greater security, right. But at the same time, we see how the United States has been so slow in adopting that fancy EMV credit card chip.
Mm-hmm. Although that's card-based too. And actually Apple Pay is getting around that by generating an ID code for each payment, so you don't worry about compromising your personal information, your credit card information at all, and it's very secure. The issue is, the problem with Apple Pay right now is that retailers, even if they say they're going to do it, they don't train their employees well in it yet. So many people have had the experience of going to a Walgreens, for example, which says they're going to accept Apple Pay, and then Apple Pay doesn't work when you actually go to the cash register and swipe your phone.
Okay. So it sounds like a lot of the issues that we've seen and that you just brought up have more to deal with human management issues than
and that's
the
very common for information systems. You have to have people that understand how to do it, and they have to be trained somehow, either by a friend, through a viral sort of training that takes place, or through a series of videos. The company can do well putting short training type videos online that are easy to understand. And look at Apple Watch. Apple's done a great job with their videos for Apple Watch. So people can get up to speed very quickly with Apple Watch for that reason. Also, they have training in their apps, in their Apple stores as well. Real quick training, and that's what people need to get things up and running. So this whole idea of someone can teach you to do something, the important things, in a minute, oftentimes with a payment. But you have to have that sort of happen. And so how does a company make that happen? There are a lot of ways. You start on campuses, and then the students teach their parents, and then the parents know how to do it, so they teach their friends. And so that's one way to do it. That whole area is interesting to me, how simple steps are easily taught to people. But if they're not easily taught to people, then the problem is you have the information systems and no one's using them.
Yeah, I used to deal with a lot of that in my previous job, so I can completely understand.
Yeah.
I worked for Marcia McLennan, so we did a lot of risk management type consulting. It always seemed to come down to those issues, especially with technology clients. So I was, not too surprised when, you mentioned some of those points when we were delving into our research that kept coming up. But one thing I was surprised by, and that we all were surprised by, and in a negative way, is how we have been treated by the company in light of our project. Square made it very clear that they do not want us to contact them about any part of our project. Claiming that things that are on the public record are redundant and anything else is protected information. I find this particularly interesting in light of the fact that we have to, as we like to say in CCT, de-black box the technology. We have to figure out how it works. And we've been able to do that with a simple, with some Google searches and the education that we're getting through this very class.
Sure. Cool.
I'd like to hear a little bit about your thoughts about kind of the rationale behind that, whether that was an appropriate response, and some sort of
I'm a little surprised
analysis.
by that. I mean, although if they see themselves as a business model that's not going to succeed, then they're building the forts around themselves to protect themselves, which is something that happens. It doesn't speak to a positive trajectory in my book. If they have something that really is useful, they want to get it out there and get it used and talk to y'all, I think. Probably not give you the deep, dark secrets of their black box situation, but talk about it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And at least, I'm not surprised by it, but that's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're talking to you now, so that
Yeah.
wouldn't.
But I don't know the ins and outs of how their system totally works.
Sure.
But I'm sure it's not. I'm sure you could de-black box it. I'm sure there's people who've looked at it.
It's been tricky for us. I mean, we had a meeting last week where we were trying to figure out how to explain all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you don't have some of the technical specifics, you don't know which waves are going where, so you understand maybe how the information is traveling broad level,
Mm-hmm.
but then trying to explain, the magic behind the technology, there are some details that are important. So and the fact that we could be publishing something, we have a web presence, for example.
Uh-huh.
If this information is going out there and we are conveying something that is inaccurate, we just thought
want to know. Yeah.
it would be in Square's interest
Sure.
to at least correct
Sure.
us on that broad.
Well, I might have a person or two I could put you in touch with, an electrical engineer or someone that would tell you exactly what they're
Can I ask a question?
doing.
Yeah,
So one of the things that really surprised us was that, so we interviewed users of Square, small businesses,
Right.
rescues, and a lot of them said they felt comfortable using Square,
Uh-huh.
they felt secure with it, but nobody could really explain to us what about it made them feel secure. Like, they didn't understand the security features behind using it, they just knew it was secure. One of
Right.
our interviewees said, I feel secure because it's everywhere. So if everybody's using it, then it must be safe. But no one actually understood. So kind of going back to how Square didn't really talk with us, we also tried to interview someone who had low-level programming
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of
Mm-hmm.
credit card transactions,
Mm-hmm.
and they also couldn't speak with us, and they couldn't say why. So
Have you talked to people like, I wonder if somebody in the credit union here
So we
might
were
help you.
kind of baffled about how the security issue is kind of unknown to consumers, or maybe not as fully explained to them. I mean, there's probably legal jargon, on the Square website, but like, how do the users really understand the security? Do you think that's an issue?
Yeah, it is. Although I think because it's credit card swiping, they figure. I mean, to me, it seems like if they're willing to swipe an old-fashioned, swipe machine that we've all seen, they probably think, well, this is a newer system and it's probably safer. I mean, I think that's often the assumption made. So I think they're probably just doing that. And if they've crossed that bridge where they will turn over their credit card to be swiped, they don't so much care about the security of it. And there hasn't been any stories, that they go by that too. People are probably staying away from Target now, partly because of the big stories about Target data breaches. So it really hurts a company. We know that when a story breaks, like Target's data breach, it really hurt them. They'll get most of the people coming back eventually, I think, but it's hurt them a lot over the last year or so. So, and there hasn't been that with Square. To the contrary, there have been a lot of happy people with Square. Small merchants and.
I think that's one of the things our project is going to bring up is that, there's a naivete about using Square, and there are certain security flaws that we've just seen documented on forums, and with the background and education we have, we were able to at least figure out broadly how that can make sense. So I'm really interested to hear you say that, just in light of not only the physical part of the technology, but the way Square's positioned itself compared to its competitors.
Mhm.
We've seen that Square tends to operate in highly developed countries, whereas other card readers are trying to get into those other markets. I mean, China might be quite difficult, for example, right now,
Right.
but it does seem as though companies like Amazon are at least looking there. Do you have any sense of why that might be the case?
Companies like Amazon are looking in lesser developed countries, is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
they came
Yeah.
they came up with a cheaper reader that can be used in broader scale, and they want to market it as
Yeah.
widely as possible.
I think it's just Amazon is more comfortable dealing with lesser developed countries because they're, they're thinking big and like you say, Square's a smaller company and it doesn't sound like they're putting themselves out there quite as much.
Mm.
And there's still a huge market in here in the U.S. really for them to explore and probably explore a little more safely and a little more. And I don't know this, but you all could tell me. I don't know how many languages their product has been translated into, their software.
They're in Canada, Australia, and Japan right now.
So are they in Japanese in Japan?
They do have.
Okay, so that's only 2 languages then, right? So
Yeah.
there you go.
Interestingly enough,
Yeah.
that is some of the research that we've, for one particular class, we look at text, and I thought the connection would be worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because I studied how the Chinese input language, pinyin, relates to mobile phone development in China, and how, different,
So hard.
you can use social media in certain ways, why,
Yeah.
microblogging has a different cultural context.
Right.
So I just thought I'd mention that before,
Yeah.
so you're aware of maybe some of the things I
Yeah.
may or may not be sharing.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Let's see, the only other questions I had, one's broad and one is specific. The broad one is there anything that you think we should kind of focus on in our research? And then the specific one is, are there any notes about regulations in particular that are, things that we might want to target on as we go forward?
You might look at, regulation-wise, you might look at some of the issues going on in Europe. You've probably studied that they're much more into regulating e-commerce in Europe. So you might want to check with that. There was a big announcement, I think, today. I just read something that they're trying to make their own, like, protected internet kind of thing. And so I would look into that because that would be really interesting. And that also might not look good for Square. It might be sort of keeping Square from moving out, because I would think Europe would be an area that they could get into pretty easily, safely, other than that issue. So, so I would look at that. That's what occurred to me right away.
I just how you're talking about how you think credit cards are going to disappear, and within the decade. Is that just in the U.S. or?
I think everywhere.
Okay, because one thing that we were kind of focusing on in the beginning was how the U.S. is no longer a cash-based society. We're very credit-heavy compared to other cultures. A lot of other cultures, credit usage is actually pretty small, and as certain nations develop, like China and India, credit becomes a little bit more prevalent.
Right. Yeah, I would say a card-like app-based system rather than credit. It could be a debit situation too. So, and it could still be used, with mobile payments. So, but electronic payments.
Do you see
rather than swiping a card?
Do you see cash disappearing in other countries as they develop? Or, I mean, one of the things we're thinking about is how, Square and other mobile payment readers are so successful here because we're not a heavy cash-based society, where there's other countries that still rely heavily on cash. So that's kind of why there's no point looking into those areas.
I was thinking mostly the U.S., but I think probably worldwide it's going to, the percent of electronic payments is going to go way up as well. More so in the developed countries than the lesser developed countries. Some countries are, going to have a cash-based society for for probably longer than a decade or two. But that said, look at the way that mobile phones have taken over in lesser developed countries. People who never had a computer now have a phone with more power than it took to send men to the moon. That's their first real. They have all this power in there, and they can use it. All they need to do is be trained for a short time on it, and they can use it. So mobile payments are not hard. I've been sort of studying some of the apps, the sort of store-based apps like Sweetgreen and Starbucks, and it's pretty amazing how fast people get used to using those too. But I think we're going to be doing everything like that pretty soon.